Okay. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Healthy Conversations. And today's Healthy Conversation is all about tracking food. People have so many different emotional reactions when I talk about tracking food. And this is largely due to the societal influence and the messaging that we have around tracking food. So I'm going to hit high level on a couple of those different things today to see if maybe I can give you a few things to think about differently. But on my newsletter poll this week, actually last week, on my newsletter poll last week, I asked you all, do you track your food in some way? And 73% of you say that you do. That means about 27% of you don't track your food in some way. And so I want to just talk a little bit about food tracking, what it is, why it is, do you have to do it? Why do people do it? And like I said, kind of at a high level today, because there's a lot to this. There's a whole lot to this. And as I'm sure you probably know, there's a whole lot of junk out there in social media and everywhere you look, somebody will have a different opinion about tracking. So I would like to give you a more high level view so that you can kind of start thinking about whether or not it's appropriate for you. Okay. So first of all, let me just define tracking, right? Tracking your food in some way, meaning quite literally keeping track of what you eat in some way, right? That could be writing it down. That could be using an app. That could be like mentally keeping track of it. That could be, you know, following some program where you are focusing on a certain macronutrient, right? That's still tracking food because when you exclude a food from your sort of daily intake, you are tracking that you are only eating certain foods, right? So even in the exclusion of foods, like let's say there's some, I don't know, if you're on the carnivore diet, you're excluding a lot of carbohydrates. If you are on the keto diet, you're excluding also a lot of carbohydrates, but to a certain extent, also some proteins. You're focusing on fats and a certain amount of protein. If you are a vegetarian, then you are excluding meat. If you are right, so there's some kind of tracking of what goes into your body. Now, I think most people would think of tracking more from a numbers perspective or a well, I was about to say percentage perspective, but that's also numbers, right? So I think most people associate tracking with some type of number. So if that's you, then that's kind of where we're going to go a little bit today. Um, and tracking, again, could be caloric numbers, macronutrient ratios, like for instance, from a keto perspective, we're talking about percentage of calories from fat, things like that. So numbers, right, to tell us what's going into our body. Now, why am I defining tracking? Because I just want you to understand what I'm talking about here as I go into what I think about when I think of the utility or importance of tracking. Okay. So if we are going under the assumption that the reason why you would track something is because you're looking for a certain outcome, right? If we're going under that assumption, most people who are in my space are looking to lose weight and tracking as a means to getting to that outcome, right? I know I'm breaking it down very systematically. I'm doing it that way on purpose, okay? So tracking as a means to accomplish a certain outcome. Now, here's where we go horribly wrong with tracking. Most people believe that in order to track correctly, we are focusing on the sort of accuracy of the number. In other words, let's say you are looking to lose weight and you're tracking your calories and you're saying, okay, I'm going to try to hit, I don't know, 2,000 calories. Number doesn't matter. It's arbitrary. I'm going to try and hit 2,000 calories. And your energy and your time and your focus is all spent on, how do I make up the 2,000 calories and how much calories does that have in it? And does it have, too much? And is it accurate? And is it not enough? And did I go over? You're focused on the number, the calories, right? You're focused on how do I make sure that the 2000 is correct? Because we make the false assumption that it's the 2000 number that gets us to the weight loss. Now, stay with me here, okay? The 2000 number is just a placeholder. The 2000 number is not actually what's getting you to weight loss. The 2000 number is a representation of a benchmark meant to give you information. Let me explain. Unless you are hooked up to some type of machine, quite literally all day, every day, for the purpose of looking at how your body is burning energy throughout the day, all day, every day. So yes, there are machines that can, none of us are actually doing this in labs and studies and different places. There are machines that if you get hooked up to these electrodes will accurately tell you how much energy you are consuming every day by a whole lot of things. When your brain's thinking, right? When you're working out, when you're sweating, if you're stressed, there's so many different factors that change how much energy your body needs to burn every day. And unless you are hooked up to those electrodes all day, every day, nobody, no calculator, no dietitian, no wellness, expert, no practitioner, no one can accurately tell you how many calories your body needs or burns every day. No one. Now we can take best guesses, and there are certain calculators that can get close-ish, but there isn't anything other than being hooked up to those electrodes every single day, all day, that can accurately tell you how many calories you need and how many calories you're burning, okay? That being said, that doesn't mean, throw out all your tracking devices. I'm telling you that so that I can illustrate the point that when someone says, I'm going to eat 2000 calories, it is not in the eating of the 2000 calories that we get our information. Where we get our information is when I focus on 2000 calories and I consistently reach that number, what happens to the number on my body? In other words, what relationship does 2000 calories have with my relationship with gravity? Okay, it's all meant to be very scientific and unemotional because it is scientific and unemotional. And so as a topic for another day, it's all of our emotion and stuff that we put into it that makes it hard. But truly, let's say you picked the number 2000 and you ate that number consistently to the best of your ability for 30 days. You would get some information about the relationship between that consistency and your body's relationship with gravity. Either it would stay the same, go up, or go down. And based on that outcome, we would go, okay, roughly 2000 calories either keeps me maintaining my weight, increasing my weight, or decreasing my weight. It is a data point only. Now, why am I diving so detailed into this point? Because most of the people that I work with, if not all of them, have gotten terrible information about what is necessary for weight loss and weight maintenance and what it takes, and just terrible information from so many different places, which causes them to overemphasize the number. I have to hit 2000 calories. I have to hit 2000 calories. And I went over, I went under, and I have a hard time hitting it. We overemphasize the importance of that number and underemphasize the importance of understanding accountability, consistency, and relativity. So let me explain those three things. 2000 calories literally means nothing. It will only tell us, when I eat like that consistently, do I maintain my weight, gain weight, or lose weight. But it's not about the 2000 calories. It's about, did I do this thing consistently? Can I look back and say, yep, this is the amount of food that I put into my body, right? Consistently. So when we look at 2000 calories, we go, okay, I'm tracking number one so that I can be accountable to what's going in my body. I'm tracking number two so that I can be consistent, more consistent with my behaviors and see where my behaviors deviate. Do I have a more difficult time with 2000 over the weekends? Do I have a more difficult time with 2000 calories when I travel for work? Do I have a more difficult time with 2000 calories when I go on vacation? Interesting, right? So when I said earlier that the 2000 calories, it's just a benchmark, it's a placeholder. It's a placeholder for us to understand all of the information around it, right? Okay, so if I go back to the 2000 calories, am I being accountable to what goes into my body? And where do I have sort of more or less than that placeholder? Am I being consistent? And what are the times and the circumstances where it's harder for me to stay with that placeholder? And then when I said relativity, that's where I'm talking about, let's say I do eat the 2000 calories for a month. Relative to my body, does that make me go up, same, or down? Okay. Because if I ate 2000 calories a month, I'm going to have a different answer to that relativity than if my husband ate 2000 calories per month, right? The 2000 calories, again, just a placeholder, not that important, just a placeholder. Okay. But if I ate it versus my husband eating it, guess what's going to happen at the end of a month? We're going to have different outcomes relative to that 2000 number. Okay. So I'm hopefully going to bring this home for you here. 2000 calories doesn't matter. It is a placeholder. It's quite literally useless information other than a placeholder for your relationship with accountability, consistency, and what it means relative to the outcome. So when I eat 2000 calories, do I go here, here, or here? My husband eats 2000 calories. Does he stay here, here, or here, right? Gain, sustain, or lose. It's just a placeholder. Now, I believe this concept is so important because people get too wrapped up in, did I hit the number? Did I hit it right? Is that the number that's going to help me? Is that the number that's going to help me? Oh, shoot, that didn't work. And so now I lose all ability to stay on track because, oh, I'm so disappointed. Because we get too wrapped into the number. We need to be using the number as a placeholder to understand ourselves better and the information that that placeholder is feeding back to us. So, like I said, if the placeholder is 2000, when you do that, if you do it consistently, that's number one. If you're not doing it consistently, then again, the placeholder is useless. And all it's doing is letting you know that hitting 2000 calories consistently is a challenge for you. It's not about the calories, it's about consistency. Well, I'm not doing it. So we know that you need to start there. If you're not doing it consistently, then we got to start with the lack of consistency, right? But let's say you are accountable to what's going in your mouth and you are doing it consistently. And now that placeholder can tell us, well, do I want to increase that number, decrease that number, or stay right where I am based on the outcome that I saw over the month, right? So I believe that people really, really struggle with tracking because they're putting too much emphasis on making sure they get the number right. But this leaves them feeling confused, feeling defeated, all kinds of things. Because let me just, say what maybe you're hearing throughout this. The equation truly for weight loss is quite simple. People will try and make it confusing for you, and they will tell you all kinds of things, mostly to try and sell you things to make it super, super confusing. They'll say, well, you're actually eating too little. That's what's causing you to gain weight. That's not true, by the way. Or I should say it's an oversimplification of the truth, and it confuses people. I promise you something. You are never, ever, ever, ever not losing weight because you are eating too little. That's never the case. What could be the case is that because you are eating too little here, your biology is ramping up all kinds of cues to trigger you to eat too much over here. And your pendulum swings back and forth. Restriction, overconsumption, restriction, overconsumption, restriction, overconsumption. People oversimplify that and they'll say, well, that's happening because you're eating too little. No, it's not. That's confusing for someone to hear. What's happening is that because you're hungry, your body's kicking up all kinds of cues that is resulting in you eating too much. Okay, so that the net output, remember when I said what we're looking at is relativity over time, the net output is an excess, a surplus over time that may have been triggered by trying to restrict over here. But over time, maybe it's restricting really, really severely Monday through Friday. But the time Saturday and Sunday comes around, we overcompensate and we create a surplus. And people will say, I don't know what's happening. I'm just eating too little, right? You're not. You're in a surplus. People will say, oh, it must be my insulin or my cortisol, right? And here's what I'm going to tell you. There has never, ever, ever been a study where the food has been accounted for. And what I mean by the food has been accounted for, I mean, they have fed people only what is in the metabolic ward. So it's not self-reported. They give the people the food. They know exactly how much food is in it. They know exactly how much people are consuming. There's not a chance for them to consume outside of the food. When they have controlled for calories, there has never been a study where people have been in a calorie deficit and not lost weight. It's just never happened. What happens is there's all kinds of mechanisms and things that come into play that make it difficult for us to be consistent with our calorie intake. Yes, if you have insulin spikes up and down, it is going to make it difficult for you to be consistent with your calorie intake. Yes, if you are constantly hungry, it is going to make it difficult for you to be consistent with your calorie intake. Yes, if your cortisol is out of whack, it is going to be difficult for you to be consistent with your calorie intake, but it is not because there is something broken in your metabolism. When you are in a deficit, you will lose weight. When you are in a relative maintenance, you will maintain weight. And when you are in a surplus, you will gain weight. And it is quite literally that simple. I said simple, not easy. There are all kinds of factors that come into play that, like I said, make this more difficult. But if I'm taking this all the way back to the tracking conversation, what people miss about tracking is that there's some magic number that is right for you, that if you just found the magic number and focus on that magic number would make you lose weight. That's not it. It's that orienting yourself to a benchmark like 2000 helps give you the information you need to understand if you are in maintenance, surplus, or deficit relative to that number. And if you find out that you're in a surplus relative to that number, then you know how to adjust. And again, you're not looking for a magic number of 1400. You're looking for, oh, I recognize that I was in a surplus. So I need to make sure that I have a little bit more of a deficit, meaning I need to consume relative to that surplus a little bit less. I hope that's making sense, that we need to focus more on how weight loss works rather than what the right numbers are. Okay. And so for people who struggle with tracking, I always tell them, you don't even have to get the tracking right. They don't. You just have to get enough information to know, am I eating more, same, or less relative to what I was eating before? That's all you need to know. So when people get caught up in the, like, I have to get tracking right, you don't. You just need to make sure that if it's not going in the direction that you want it to go, that relative to what you were doing before, you are in a deficit now. What that might mean for you could be just putting a little less on your plate systematically over time. You don't have to get the numbers right. You just have to understand what your body is telling you relative to what you're eating. I hope that makes sense. It may have spurred more questions than answers. If so, please feel free to ask them to me in all of the ways that you always ask them. You can DM me, you can email me, you can write in a comment, however you want me to go deeper into this concept. But my hope, anybody who works with me understands that I want this to be as easy as possible for you, quite literally. Everything that I want you to do for weight loss, I want it to be easy, sustainable, as enjoyable as possible, right? And so we don't overcomplicate things here. We understand how things work, and then we find the easiest, laziest, simplest, most enjoyable way to get to that thing. And I think that this is part of that for you, to kind of shift the way that we are understanding tracking and its utility. All right, probably a lot more to be said about this, but I'll stop there for today and pick it up next week with more healthy conversations.